Now, as the controversy over Nigeria's Central Bank of Nigeria's new cash withdrawal limits continues to generate national debate across the country, Governor of the Apex Bank is insisting that Nigeria's economy is overdue to go cashless, as the federal government had sufficiently invested in required payment system infrastructure to make this seamless. Mr. Mefele revealed this shortly after meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari in Daura, Katsina State, and responding to the National Assembly's rebuttal of the policy. The Apex Bank governor said the withdrawal limits were not cast in stone, but would be reviewed upwards with time. Controversies have trailed CBN's latest policy, which limits daily cash withdrawals to 20,000 naira and weekly withdrawals to 100,000 naira for individuals. Let's get more insights from my guest. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Cowry Assets Management Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. He's a friend of the house, too. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. It's good to see you this Friday afternoon.
Thank you, Tolu, for having me. It's always a pleasure to interview with you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start this way. We know about the redesigning. Let's put that on one side. But now is the issue. The main issue is the cash limit. That's withdrawal limits. Everyone is worried. Now, what does this really mean? I know the central bank is not taking charge of anyone's money, but we need clarity. How do you understand this, or how would you explain this to Nigerians?
Well, how will I explain this? How will I explain this to Nigerian? I think that should have been a better job of the
CBN governor. Okay.
Yes. But in any case, my understanding of this is that what I can hazard a guess is that the motivations behind this policy, and I think there are about 3 or 4 motivations behind the policy, or motives behind the policy. One of which is that, which I think may seem to be the primary motive behind the policy, is that the central bank is trying to curtail access to cash for those who want to compromise the electoral process. Because if you just oppose this policy on a limit to cash withdrawals, beside the policy on Naira redesign, you will come up with one clear message. One, those who have started up Naira in their homes, the central bank has made that Naira worthless with that redesign of Naira. Secondly, if you look at the time limits or the limitations on time that were imposed by the central bank, the Naira design, the old Naira notes become no longer legal tender by 31st of January. Election is first presidential election is on 25th of February, and 2 weeks after you have the governorship elections. Second, the central bank has said that the new Naira withdrawal limit will come into effect on 9th of January, just a month and before the election. So what this is imply that, one, people will not have enough of the new currencies to begin to compromise electorate during the election. I think for me, that seemed to be one of the most the underlying logic behind the policy. Of course, there are ancillary benefits to the policy. One is the issue of crime, fighting crime, particularly violent crime, in particular as it relates to kidnapping for ransom. You see, basically by limiting the amount that you can withdraw from your account to 100,000 naira per week for individual and 500,000 naira per week for corporates, it will be difficult for kidnappers to insist that victims pay or their families pay ransoms running into millions, because it's impossible to gather such money. What that would mean is that kidnappers will be driven out of business, because if the prime objective of kidnapping is to get ransom, and it becomes impossible to pay ransom with cash, and you can't pay ransom with transfer because they will track the account and put a hold on that account. They put no debit on that account. Even if they don't put the no debit on the account, anybody who has that account will have to explain why such payment has to come into his account. So I think that's one of the benefits we may get from this new policy. The others, financial inclusion, you're going to see an improvement in financial inclusion, because virtually everybody who doesn't have a bank account or financial system relationship will want to get that. And if you have an improved financial inclusion in your economy, it becomes more effective. I mean, monetary policies become more effective because the financial system is a transmission channel for implementing monetary policies.
Beautiful way to start now, Mr. Chukwu. We instituted this cashless policy since 2012. That's about 10 years ago. Where do we stand now? What would you say? How well have we invested in infrastructure? Some are worried that if we adopt the e-system or the online system in its totality for transactions, issues could pop up and there could be challenges. Maybe that's why people are scared and think that the CBN should have a second look at this decision.
Well, what I would say is that how far have we gone with the cashless policy? I think we've achieved a lot of milestones. If you look at the payment system in the country, you realize that more than 90% of payment systems are going through electronic payment methods. Just about 10% are going through cash and check payments. Unlike in the past, catch your mind back to 15 years ago, virtually all transactions were done with cash. I used to work in banks then when the bank's greatest headache was to set up their cash handling facilities. And the big banks were the only one who had a muzzle to set up their cash handling facility because cash was a major cost strain. And cash, at some point, they had to impose cash charges for lodgements above certain limits. But today, you hardly see anybody with tons of cash. In Ghana must go by going to the banking hall to make lodgement. So I think we've achieved a lot of milestones. Like I said, more than 90% of commercial transactions today go through electronic payment platforms instead of the cash or even check payments. Then, as it relates to infrastructural challenges, of course, there are still localities in this country that are not fully covered by effective internet services. So you still have locations where they have the 2G or 3G network that may not be very amenable to electronic payment platforms. So, but what I expect that you're going to have issues in those areas. But the fact is that if you look at, on a balance, the volume of transactions that happen in such places are quite low. I'm not saying anybody should be excluded, but I also believe that the compelling need to the compelling need in those locations are going to drive the telco companies to expand their network service. Of course, we know that we already have telco that have 5G licenses and are rolling out. So with the rollout of 5Gs in the next couple of months, you're going to see very fast internet services across the country. And I think whatever early teething problems we may have in those localities where you don't have strong internet services will be addressed in due course.
Seems like you addressed my next question, but I will still ask that what is the implication for those living in those kind of areas you're talking about, rural areas? What's their stand in all of this at the moment with the current infrastructure that we have?
Well, I think some of them, like I said, the volume of financial transactions that take place in those very rural areas are quite few.
Yeah.
In terms of size, they're also low-ticket transactions. The POS operators will still be there probably to provide some services to fill the gap. But there are also other hitches you're going to have in very rural areas. You have some people who may not have had some level of some form of formal education and may find it difficult to navigate through the online payment systems because they can't log into their smartphones. They don't even have smartphones. And then you're going to deal with such people. But the key thing is that their volume of transaction is low. So what we now need to think about, think of how do we address their financial needs? Those who live in places where they don't have strong internet services, those who are not formally, who don't have formal education and cannot effectively use electronic payment platforms. And I think what we may need to look at what has happened in a country like Kenya, where M-Pesa was able to penetrate even farmers who did not have formal education. And we need to also evolve mechanisms that will ensure that those people are not left in the loop. And I think the POS will come into play. And I've advocated that, look, the POS operators have to also become ingenious. They need to go back and look at what used to work in the past. And in the past, you used to have vouchers for airtime. And those vouchers were effectively money because those vouchers, you can actually swap them for money at a discount, which is a fee for the person who is providing that service. And I think they can also use similar things to provide financial accommodation to those who live in very rural areas where they don't have strong internet services. And maybe with voucher that can be cast at the office or the spot where the POS operator is located. Such things we must find ways to ensure that nobody is left out of the financial loop.
Beautiful stuff there. Moving on, I want to ask you this question, Mr. Chukwu. What happens to a country where you have over 85%, just like what the CBN cited, of cash in circulation outside the banking vaults? What does this mean for any country?
Of course, one of the things it will mean is that the effectiveness of monetary policy will become weak because when you make decisions that will either slow down money circulation or increase money circulation because you either want to use monetary policies to fight inflation, it will become ineffective because the monies are already there. They don't need to go to the banking system to make withdrawals or make payments. So you have a parallel economy that is completely insulated or largely insulated from the former financial system, and therefore it's not affected by monetary policy decisions. So that's one of the weaknesses you have, where you have a large pool of your currency in circulation outside the banking system.
Beautiful stuff there. But also, there's another argument that the CBN has a lot to grapple with at the moment. Why this Naira thing, particularly the downgrades and all that is happening within the financial space? Do you buy to this submission?
Well, of course, CBN has a lot on its plate. But like I said earlier, that if I look at the fact that the central bank came up in October with a Naira redesign and in December came up with a policy to limit the amount that is withdrawn, and all of them have terminal dates just before the elections. I think what the central bank is doing, and it's clearly driven by the need to frustrate those who want to buy voters conscious by directing them with relation to vote based on the money on monetary inducement. And if you also recognize the natural orientation of our president, who is the president is always excited when it comes to any policy that will fight corruption, even if that policy is not going to be on a long-term basis. And just suppose that with the fact that the governor of Central Bank went to Daura to meet the president, obviously to get a further assurance on this policy. So I think it's going to be, from my own perspective, a kind of policy agreement between the central bank and the president, all towards fighting electoral malpractices. Of course, we know central bank has a policy autonomy, but clearly some policies of the central bank has to be cleared with the president, like the issue of Naira redenomination on Naira currency redesign. And I also think because of the political sensitivity of this current policy on maximum cash withdrawal, that the central bank also sought and clearly obtained the president's consent.
Now, I've heard many analysts use this opportunity to assess the central bank in its entirety, the anchor borrower scheme, investing in several sectors, and saying directly that investing in rice farming and all of that. And at the moment, some say a bag of rice is selling for as much as 50,000 Naira. And a lot of money has been put into that. I'd like you to take us through what this means. Particularly, are we going to go through a transition period before we start to see the positives of all of these investments? Or what is really happening? Why is it not affecting food price? Talking about, let's focus on agriculture now.
Okay, if we talk about agriculture, and let's look at the rice you mentioned. There's been a tremendous improvement in the volume of rice produced in the country, partly supported by the central bank, partly supported by the government initiatives. The anchor borrower program, there have been a lot of commercial rice farmers who have accessed funding from the central bank. Then you have the off-taker agreement, and the anchor borrower program. Of course, you also know that it also means that you have multiple cultivators who also access funding to the anchor borrower. So I think if you look at rice, for instance, we've seen a lot of improvement in rice production. One of the reasons why we've see very high price of rice are twofold. One, the fact that rice was largely imported here, and the current production of rice in the country has not caught up with the demand. And then we banned the importation of rice. So since you ban the importation of rice and your local production has not caught up with the demand, then you certainly have to deal with a higher price. Secondly, in terms of yield, rice yield or cost of production in the local economy, we still have elevated cost compared to the cost of producing the same or the yield from the 1 hectare of land cultivated in maybe China or Indonesia or Brazil compared to what we yield, rice yield is in the country today, because we're still improving on our know-how. Added to that is that the cost of processing rice locally, and then you have to deal with multiple years, couple of years of flooding that destroyed entire season of rice cultivation. This year alone, we've seen almost the paddy rice that was planted destroyed by flooding. So hopefully, we're only looking forward to the upland rice planting, which is second season planting, that happens only largely in the north, because the southern part of the country, most of them don't have irrigation and they don't do two-season farming of rice. So you are going to see a slowdown or reduction in production of rice, while the ban is still subsisting, though you should expect that we have supply shortfall that will continue to lead to price uptick within the agricultural sector. Then I must not fail to mention that beyond rice, you also have destruction of farmers in major farming belts of the country. So we've not been able to achieve some of the initiatives of the central bank, achieve fully the benefit of funding, because it's not just funding that agricultural operators need. They need irrigation, they need safety, security. They need to be able to go to their farms and produce without fear of being kidnapped or paying ransom to anybody. And we know that farmers in some parts of the country now pay ransom to go to their farms and also use their farm produce to pay taxes to bandits. So these are factors that monetary policy cannot address.
Beautiful stuff. Mr. Chukwu, before I let you go, more money in the bank vaults and with the CBN, will this also translate to maybe more credit, maybe more initiatives that could help, grow the economy and, of course, make government achieve inclusive growth? Will it give more opportunities to Nigerians?
Well, what I would say is that the central bank policy orientation today is against lending. What we have, the central bank that is driving the contractionary monetary policies. They've increased lending rate, benchmark rate from 11.5% to 16.5%, just about 500 basis point increase in the past couple of months. They've increased the cash reserve ratio from 27.5%, 32.5%, another 500 basis point increase in the past couple of months. And this will mean that cost of borrowing is more expensive. So even if you have additional flow of funding or deposit back to the banking system, the policy of the central bank are constraining lending. And even the lending that is coming at a very exorbitant rate, because central bank is now focused on fighting inflation. Though I disagree with that policy, but what I'm just saying in effect is that the inflow of liquidity back into the banking system will not necessarily lead to an increase in lending if the current contractionary monetary policy of the central bank is maintained.
So the withdrawal policy is not to prevent depositors from having access to their funds, because that is something that is making a lot of people scared. They think they won't have access to their funds, Mr. Chukwu.
That's absolutely not correct. People who have deposits most people that actually have balances in their accounts have been paying through electronic payment platforms. Most people hardly go to the banks today to make withdrawals. I recall in the past when people go to shopping malls and then they go to an ATM in the shopping complex and withdraw money from the ATM and go to inside the shop to pay with cash. But now that era has passed. Nigerians now understand the use of electronic payment platform, their POS card and all those things. So I think the concerns about people not having access to their funding, as long as they have credit balances, is misplaced. Because if you have your money, you can make payment through any of the multiple payment platforms. You don't need to withdraw so much cash. And the reality is that there are few large ticket transactions that are above 100,000 naira that you cannot pay with electronic payment. And most people that have, most merchants have POS terminals. They have their account number displayed, and they expect you to make. If you go to some places and even want to pay them cash, I have been to a hotel when you want to pay them cash for rental of their rooms. They insist that you pay charge for that card because it will cost them money to lodge it in. So Nigerians have really migrated or pivoted away from cash to electronic payment platforms.
Very interesting one, yeah. Well, today is 9th December, and we're almost wrapping up the year. What is your outlook for the financial space? Maybe we'll just do a little bit of summary of what you think with the current realities on ground.
Well, I think if you look at the outlook for the economy, we should expect the elevated inflation rate to subsist. We have more than 20% inflation rate today. I've mentioned the issue of flooding, which will further reduce the availability of food and lead to further increase in food inflation. So in terms of exchange rate, I expect that we seem to have gone beyond the great panic that we saw when change of Naira currency came about, where Naira almost touched 900 Naira to a dollar, and then we're back to the 700 region. And I hear this NNP say crude production has gone back to about 1.6 million barrels a day. So what that means that in the next couple of months, we should have an improvement in our foreign exchange earnings, which will further stabilize the exchange rate and possibly lead to some moderation in Naira exchange rate. In terms of other macroeconomic variables, interest rates, depositors will continue to suffer because they are not, unless you have a strong bargaining power, you may not be able to get as good compensation for your deposit with the banks. The increase in savings rate is marginal, but on the lending side, marginal borrowers are paying out more than 30%, so cost of borrowing will continue to go up. And what this means is that real sector productive activity will slow down. We saw a reduction in GDP growth to about 2.25%. I think that could moderate further if the current contractionary monetary policies are sustained, because borrowers are not able to access credit, and when they access those credits, it's going to come at exorbitant rates. And a current rate of 30%, 33% lending rate, it becomes unattractive for you to go into real sector production, because unless you have a short access of conversion cycle like traders, you may not be able to make money with borrowing at current rate.
Always interesting talking to you. Thank you so much, Chief Executive Officer, Cowry Assets Management Limited. I must thank you for your contributions to the program every time. I appreciate this.
My pleasure.
Enjoy your weekend.